Jonathan Chick back with you live with another episode of Shtisel Man. We're looking now at season 2, episode 6. Sorry for the delay between my last episode and now. Had family events to attend to. All good stuff. So very happy to be back. This video might be a bit provocative. I've been toying with the idea of discussing this issue for some time, but I think I did decide to give it a shot today and connect it to one scene in this week's episode in Shtisel. So we see that Shulem is asked by his fiancée, who we see is quite the meddler, to fire his secretary, Aliza. Now, it's true that Shulem could be a little bit flirtatious, maybe on purpose, maybe not so much on purpose, but very mild. And the idea of having a female secretary is pretty common, even among people from any way of life or any stripe. Of course, are there times that a man and a woman who are secretary and boss can involve themselves in some sort of affair or whatnot? Of course it can happen. But that doesn't mean that willy-nilly you need to just fire her because she's female. That's a bit extreme. But that's what happens in this week's episode, that due to, jealousy or due to a warped sense of religiosity, he gets the gun to his head to fire her. And as we see at the end of the episode in Shtisel, she's sadly a very good worker, a very, very accomplished person and very good for the school, instead is unceremoniously let go. Now, there's a lot of ways I can go with this, but I'm going to take a stab at something that's been, those who know me know that I have a very, very strong opinion against extreme religiosity. I myself am a religious Jew, I'm an Orthodox Jew, but when things are taken to the extreme level, it colors and actually distorts the intent of, I believe, what God and what the Judaism really stands for and believes. Specifically when it comes to men and women. So, see, the post-Holocaust, after the Holocaust, when Jewish communities had to rebuild, and many thought that American Judaism and Judaism as a whole might be completely wiped out, but made a tremendous comeback. And the Jews have been around for thousands and thousands of years. But after the Holocaust, there was a move towards real extreme piety. And this was a response, perhaps, of sort of like closing the walls down. In Germany, they were very open and very assimilated and whatnot. And maybe this was God's way of saying, you have to become more pious. Again, we don't know what God's intent was, and this is certainly not about the Holocaust. But post-Holocaust, these communities developed a real extreme approach, especially in terms of relationships between men and women. To the extent that in some communities, even today, men and women walk on separate sides of the street. Men and women, some women do not drive. Those of you who've watched Unorthodox or other series. Now, again, I say this with the caveat that there are many people who have a very, very hard agenda against ultra-Orthodoxy, against Haredim, and therefore they use this to sort of throw a whole big blanket on it that it's all bad. And it's not true. There's a lot of good. There's the kindness aspect, the family aspect, the familial aspect. Many parts of the religious experience are beautiful and wonderful. I want to take apart this one area of extremism, specifically around relations with men and women. And so walking on separate sides of the street, women not driving, and a one that's really bothered me for a long time, which is no pictures of women in the Jewish, very Orthodox, very, again, Haredi publications, magazines, and whatnot. Now, this was not the case for many, many, many years. In fact, This is just really a relatively new thing where in the last maybe 10, 15 years that these magazines have taken the piety, if you will, to a next level and have stopped putting pictures of women in magazines. So you might have an ad like this for like 15 speakers for a Passover event, and like 12 will be men and 3 will be women or whatever. And the 12 men will have pictures and the 3 women will just have boxes with a silhouette and not an actual picture of them. This is, in my humble opinion, extremism. Because the thing is this, if men and women and boys and girls when they're growing up can't even say Shabbat Shalom or Good Shabbos to the opposite sex, and men and women are separate to such a degree where there's absolutely no connection and no understanding of the opposite sex, whether it be as a young child, whether it be as a teenager, whether it be as an adult. I'm not advocating that there should be, premarital sex and other whatnot and things, mingling or bar hopping or whatever else. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that to create an extreme situation where there's such a division and such a divide between the boys and girls, between the men and the women, I think it creates what the Talmud says, tafasta meruba lo tafasta. If you go to such a level, to such a extreme level, you end up with nothing. So what happens is that what happens when a man in a religious lifestyle never sees pictures of women in their magazines? I would rather them see pictures of modest role models who are female than open up in the doctor's waiting room, Cosmopolitan or whatever else, or other things that are just a click away on the computer. And then you end up with this dichotomy between nothing and everything. Rather, and also I think it's a slight to the women. I really do. I think that I'm not advocating, there be a scantily clad issue, in the Jewish newsstands. What I'm saying is that there be appropriate photos and appropriate of the women in the magazines. Situations like this, when someone says you have to fire her because she's a woman, she's a temptress or something, that's ridiculous, okay? Now, obviously, there are cases and there are situations where in the specific situation, if there is that unhealthy relationship or office romance, that's something else. But as a rule, men and women can work together. Men and women can interact with each other. Men and women do that because that's the way God created the world. Okay? In my opinion, he didn't create the world where men and women walk on separate sides of the street. He didn't create a world where men are visible and women are not. And he didn't create a world where men and women sort of don't have any interactions for 20 years and then all of a sudden get married, and then they do. I prefer a model where, I'm not saying their schools even have to be co-ed. You can have separate schools, and in fact, in many situations, and usually for the situation for women, girls have a tremendous advantage by being in all-girls schools because of the dynamic of the men and women in the classroom. But be that as it may, if they're in a separate school, that's fine. And in fact, maybe it's good. In many cases it is, but you can interact. If you see a guy, someone in the pizza shop, you can say hello. If you see them on the street walking home from synagogue, you can say hello, right? If you invite people for your Sabbath table and there are boys and girls together, that's okay, as long as it's done appropriately, okay? So I do not want to, I worried about sharing this video, and I might get some interesting feedback from this one due to concerns that people might take this to the other way and say, well, that means, all Haredis are bad or all the Haredi lifestyles, messed up. No, that's not true. There's wonderful things about it. But in this one area, relations between men and women, I do believe there needs to be more normalcy. There needs to be more of a way to understand each other in a healthy manner. and interact with each other in a healthy manner. We'll be back with more next time. I'm Shtisel Man. Thank you.